And so I think the real takeaways for us is that, one, it's super important to optimize every system. So things are changing all the time, whether it be utility tariffs, fuel prices, the cost of equipment. And we should talk about this in another episode, Dan, around the tariffs and the impact on that, on equipment costs, as well as things like the IRA. But it's important that we're looking at all of those variables and then optimizing the system to maximize the economics. But if anyone has any concerns that the IRA is going to get repealed, like, now is the time to act, because the tax credits are still in effect. You can get access to them, and you can save anywhere from 30 to 50% on every dollar spent, which, as we've highlighted here, can actually really create highly viable returns on investment. Unleashing American energy. In today's episode, Dan and I are going to dig into what this executive order means, just signed this week by President Trump, and the potential impacts on the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been a hot topic. And most importantly, how is this going to impact our investment and opportunity of on-site energy systems? Because we get this question from customers, from investors, from listeners, and I think it's top of mind for everyone. How is this new administration going to affect the rollout of on-site and clean energy systems? But before we do, Dan, how are you doing?
Quite well, Gareth. Great to be back with you. As you know, it's been a productive long weekend here in the Roberts household. Knocked out a ton of projects. I've now, knocked out some plumbing, some electrical, some gardening. Just a regular Renaissance man, I guess. But more than anything, it was good to spend time with the family and get a lot of these things that have been stacking up on my to-do list. And we had a couple sick boys at home, so forced me to stay in and take care of these things, so it felt good. How about yourself, Gareth?
Well, a bit of enforced downtime is a bit rough when it's sick kids, but sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. So I'm glad you've taken advantage. For me, I got to put the new car through its paces. Had a 1,200 mile drive from San Diego up to Bend, Oregon. Ethan's on ski week holiday this week. For those that aren't in the West Coast, ski week is a week off of school for all the kids. And we thought we'd come and hang out Mount Bachelor, get a few days of skiing. Mel and I are going to juggle a bit of work and a bit of pleasure, working remotely this week. So it's been awesome. The truck performed amazingly. Lots of experience charging it. And we can talk about that in another episode, some of the trials and tribulations. And it's been an awesome experience. And I love it even more than I did when I got it. So super exciting times. But Dan, let's dig in. Unleashing American energy, super catchy name. Talk about marketing and branding. This one's spot on. An executive order that was signed on Tuesday by President Donald Trump, and it includes the immediate pause to the disbursement of federal grants and loans under the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I think this is super interesting, and it's certainly created quite a stir in the market. And I think it'd be good to just have a bit of a reminder of what the IRA is, which is of particular importance to our industry and on-site energy. It was passed in 2022, and this was really a flagship of the Biden administration. And it was all about focusing on clean energy technology, manufacturing, and innovation. And the intent was to deploy up to $370 billion in investments to incentivize more private investment in clean energy, create more jobs, build the supply chain, and really, double down on energy sovereignty for the US. And a lot of this was to support climate goals, which included achieving 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035, a 50 to 52% reduction in economic-wide net greenhouse gases from 2005 levels to 2030, and net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050. But Dan, it'd be super interesting to just remind us of what were the opportunities under the IRA for on-site energy.
Certainly. But before I do, I just wanted to throw one bit out there, which is, as we think about the potential for the IRA to go away, I think it's important to look at where our new electricity generation capacity is coming from. So in 2024, so last year, of the new U.S. power plants that came online, 96% were carbon free. And to just do a quick breakdown, 60% was solar, 23% was batteries, 10% wind, 4% natural gas, and 2% nuclear. And so that gives me a bit of confidence that even if there's a kind of an attack, if you will, on clean energy with the new administration, I think that's going to be really short lived, because if that continues, then we're just going to see generation costs come up. And we'll touch on here in an episode here in the next few weeks how electricity generation costs have been coming down for many, many years, even though we may not feel that in the electricity bills that ratepayers pay. And we'll talk about the dichotomy there. If we see a rise in generating costs, we're only going to see a more rapid rise in what folks are paying in their bills. So I think that's an important piece to note. So the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act, and how it impacts on-site energy. Most specifically, it's in the investment tax credits, or ITC. And the ITC is a tax credit. It kind of brought the base back up to a 30% tax credit, meaning for every $1 million that's invested into a project, you get $300,000 in tax credits, not tax write-offs, but dollar for dollar tax credits to offset a tax burden that a business or an individual may have. There are as well some adders or bonuses. The most notable of them are the energy community bonus, which is a 10% bonus. So those are maps that are issued by the IRS that indicate whether a particular facility falls into an energy community zone. And so now that bumps your tax credit up to 40%. Another one is the low income tax credit, which is another 10% adder. And again, maps are drawn to identify where those places are. We automatically identify those in the VECKTA platform. But that one is a lottery. And so we don't like to get people too excited about them because it was massively oversubscribed last time around. Another notable one, which we're starting to see growth in this, which is in domestic content. So using solar panels and or batteries and other infrastructure that was manufactured here in the US, you get a 10% bonus on. And so I would just say that another reason that we don't get people too excited about that is that the supply chain there is just not as robust. So the demand is far outpacing supply. And so it's really hard to get your hands on some of that. So those are some of the keys to note. I will add that as the federal agencies are really required to go through all of their funding disbursement policies outlined by both the IRA and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, they need to make sure that they align with the objectives as set out in this Unleashing American Energy Executive Order. So, Gareth, there's a couple more nuances here. Maybe you can share about what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Dan, that this isn't the first, I suppose, attempted repeal. I think most people wouldn't actually realize that, since its inception, there's been many attempts to try and repeal certain aspects of the IRA. And, when you actually break it down, it probably will give us a good indication of which areas are going to be under most heavy scrutiny as we progress through this time. So the first is the funding for Executive Order 14082. There's been 17 attempts to repeal that, and that's the function by which we then implement the IRA. Then after that, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, 5 attempts to kill that. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program, 3 attempts. The Energy Efficiency Rebate, 3 attempts. And then 2 attempts on both the Electrical Vehicles Tax Credit and the Department of Energy Loan Program. So I think super interesting to actually understand that there's been multiple hits on this, and the IRA has survived all of them. But more importantly is that the executive order does not currently impact the $270 billion worth of tax credits, which you just alluded to, Dan, which are super vital to the deployment of on-site energy systems. And it's unclear if Trump and the administration intend to try and target them or not. I think what's in our favor is that there's been a lot of support for this from the Republican side of the House. A letter to the Speaker, Mike Johnson, in August 2024 was signed by 18 Republican House representatives, 14 of whom are currently in their positions, and it highlighted the dangers of prematurely repealing energy tax credits. And they were signed by representatives from districts of 13 states, including mostly Republican states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, of which, out of their total GDP, Nevada deployed 2.4% of that, or realized 2.4% of that in benefits from the IRA, 1.8% from Arizona, 1.4% from Georgia. So these states are really benefiting from the IRA. And a study completed by the American Clean Power Association showed that there's going to be massive economic opportunities as a result of the IRA, spurring $3.8 trillion in net investment in the US economy, which creates an actual 4x return on taxpayer investments. So I think, for all these reasons, there's lots of opportunity for the IRA. We don't know how it's going to play out. There's lots of theories. I think in our minds, there's like three primary options. It stays intact and it continues to operate as it was written. It was written to benefit broadly across the US economy. The second is we revert back to the ITC structure that was in effect prior to the IRA, which was essentially you started at 30%, and then over time it started to diminish. So you went from 30% to 26%, and then it kept stepping down all the way to zero. So that could happen as a way of sort of weaning the industry off the tax credits. And lastly, it could be repealed altogether. And I think what we'd really like to do now, Dan, is dig into, under these scenarios, how would that impact the systems that we deploy and how we analyze them. So do you want to give us an overview of a system that you looked at?
So I dug into the data. We used the VECKTA platform to run some different analyses here to see how would it impact the business case, and really across three really core financial metrics. So net present value, IRR, or internal rate of return, and simple payback. And so the analysis that I did was, what if we took a like-for-like system? So the exact same system, and this was for a facility in California, but it was just under 800 kilowatts of solar, 789 kilowatts of solar, and a decent-sized battery system, a little over 1.5 megawatt hours of battery energy storage system. And so the impacts, they're actually pretty big when you just do an exact same system. When you go from a 30% tax credit down to 0%, so you remove the tax credit altogether. We didn't go through any scenarios of what you had talked about of the step downs. We just said, what if it remains, or what if it just completely goes away? And so in that scenario, across those three key financial metrics, the net present value decreased by a little over 85%. From $750,000 down to just over $100,000. You see the IRR, the internal rate of return, decreasing not nearly as dramatically, but decreasing by 27% from 15 down to 11%. And then you see the payback period increasing by 45% from a little over 6 years to a little over 9 years. And so I think it's pretty dramatic shifts there. Now, IRR, I would say, is probably the most common metric that's used by investment committees when looking at making investments, and going from 15%, which is pretty good, down to an 11% is a pretty big jump. I still think that, given some of the other benefits of these systems across reducing carbon emissions and/or resilience, I have seen investment committees get behind these, but it's much more challenged in the no or 0% investment tax credit scenario. So, but I don't think we just look at things in a vacuum and say, well, I've already decided on this particular system, and that's what I'm going to have to go with, and I'm just gonna eat the loss of these changes to the investment tax credit. So The flip of that is, what if we optimize? And what if we take that into account and determine how does the system change and how does that impact the economics? And I know you did that, Gareth.
Yeah. I took the exact same facility, same location, exactly the same facility, same load profile, same utility tariffs, and ran the analysis of what would a system look like if the IRA existed and we got access to the ITC, and what would happen if it disappeared? How would that impact the optimal system that we deploy? And it's super interesting. I think this really highlights the importance of ensuring that we're constantly assessing each facility on its own merit. Every facility has its own constraints, its own opportunities. And so we want to really optimize around that. So in this case, the facility with the ITC ended up being a 1.7 megawatt solar system with a 6,000 kilowatt hour battery. Without the ITC existing, the optimizer then downsizes the system to minimize the capital investment. So we go from a $6 million capital investment to a $4 million system, which is a 3,600 kilowatt hour battery and a 1.4 megawatt solar facility. So you can see it reduces the size of the system. And it's doing that to try and preserve the economics of the investment. So it does that quite favorably compared to the scenario you described, Dan, where the economics essentially get smashed to bits. Here, the economics are preserved quite well, but you still do see an impact. So in terms of the net present value, we see a drop from a little over 4 million to 2.7 million, a 38% decrease. We see the IRR drop from 19% to 14%, a 25% decrease. The payback period goes from 4.5 years to 7 years, but the lifetime savings of the system still are awesome, but you go from a $28 million saving to $25 million. So I think to summarize, even without the ITC, the economics are still amazing. You deploy this system and you save $25 million over 25 years, and you can still pay off the system in 7 years. And you are still investing in an asset that is going to deliver the cost savings, the sustainability, potentially even the resilience if you've designed it right. But it's not without its impacts in terms of you've now got a slightly smaller system and you've got worse off economics. And so I think the real takeaways for us is that, one, it's super important to optimize every system. So things are changing all the time, whether it be utility tariffs, fuel prices, the cost of equipment. And we should talk about this in another episode, Dan, around the tariffs and the impact on that, on equipment costs, as well as things like the IRA. But it's important that we're looking at all of those variables and then optimizing the system to maximize the economics. But if anyone has any concerns that the IRA is going to get repealed, now is the time to act, because the tax credits are still in effect. You can get access to them, and you can save anywhere from 30 to 50% on every dollar spent, which, as we've highlighted here, can actually really create highly viable returns on investment.
No doubt, Gareth. It's I'm glad that we went through this exercise. I think it was eye-opening for me to see the difference between an optimized system, given the changes, versus just sticking with your guns and staying with the same system. So I agree with you. Let's hope that they don't get repealed, but at the same time, just drives a bit of a different system that's going to be the optimal one. So important to always look at how those changes impact the best system out there. So thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, love it. These systems are awesome. They're highly economic. You just got to do them in the right way, and we'll maximize all the benefits where we can. Where they don't exist, we'll crack on and continue to deploy awesome systems.
That's right.
Good chat, Dan.
See ya.
See ya.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.